Also, I would like to mention Criston Cole's haircut.
It looks so bad. Okay, thank you.
Bad.
I think we all agree that we hate Cole, but we can also all agree that Fabian Frankel is hot as hell. And then he came out with that page boy haircut. And I was like, did you borrow Jacaerys' wig from the first season? Like, ew, what are you doing?
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast. We, Addison and Lorraine, are two best friends who love to explore the world of fantasy through books, shows, and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are covering House of the Dragon, Season 2, Episode 3. I felt like the pacing of this episode was very quick. It felt like there was this race for the Riverlands going on, and everyone's trying to strategically make moves, yet simultaneously get information they need to actually be confident in their next moves, if that makes sense.
Yeah, see, I totally disagree. I thought this episode was really slow. I thought the narrative was disjointed. I didn't feel like I got invested in what was happening with anyone, right? You had a lot of really good setup that could have really been conceptually interesting, like Daemon at Harrenhal or Rhaenyra going to see Alicent. And something about it just didn't hit the same way I feel like it has in other episodes. So I will say I liked it better on my second rewatch than I did the first time, but it didn't really move the needle for me. I gotta be honest.
Yeah, I don't know. I think because they were cutting between everybody, but we know war is it's been coming, but I think this has been the final. I say this every episode, though. I'm like, I think this is the final thing, and now they're gonna bring out the dragons. But no, it didn't happen.
You do say that every episode.
I know, but I did feel like maybe this was actually it, because they finally have that reconciliation. Rhaenyra and Alicent, especially, as the two people that. Well, and Rhaenys, but there's very few of them that are still trying to rein everybody in and keep it civil.
Right.
Everybody around them is like, no, bring out the dragons. Let's go. Destroy everything.
I find it interesting that so many people in the kingdom are asking to be burned. You would think the small council members specifically have a more intimate knowledge of the dragons, right? Most people have never even seen a dragon, but the small councils on both sides, they get up close and personal with the dragons on a regular basis. So they have a much better idea of their true scale and power. And you would think that more intimate knowledge would steer them in the other direction, right? They see Vhagar and they're like, yeah, we're not going to want to set that loose in the kingdom, right? And instead they're like, let the dragons out. And you're like, what? Why do you want to die? Because that is what's going to happen. You know, it's really, really bizarre.
I think it's just a testament to the underlying theme of the show in general is that everybody's gunning for power, basically, because the councils, they want the power to be the council of authority.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the theme of the show because I feel like this episode has a very distinct theme, which we will talk about when we talk about the episode title and the opening sequence.
All right. Well, let's get started then. So before we get into the show, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have explicit conversations, explicit language may be used, and triggering events may be discussed, so please adjust accordingly. As far as housekeeping updates go, we are continuing our new reader Crown of Midnight deep dive. If you are looking for a fantasy book series to start, then so far we can't recommend the Throne of Glass series enough. Also, if you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe. That way you'll always be up to date when new episodes drop. That's all for housekeeping. So this is what you can expect from today's House of the Dragon episode. First, we will start with the State of the Realm, where we recap key events. Next, we will hold a meeting with the Small Council to analyze key events and conversations. After that, we will continue with our trial in the Fantasy Court of Law to decide which team has enough evidence to support their claim to the Iron Throne. And last but not least, we will share our favorite moments from the episode. And without further ado, Addison, please update us with the State of the Realm for our episode summary.
Of course. It's the Hatfields and the McCoys House of the Dragon edition. We open this episode in the Riverlands where we see a small group of Bracken and Blackwood men almost come to blows over their allegiances to Team Black and Team Green. Just as tensions are about to boil over, we transition to the aftermath of the horrendous Battle of the Burning Mill between the same houses. We then return to Dragonstone where the Cargill twins are being buried, where Rhaenys continues to urge Rhaenyra to use every weapon in her arsenal except dragons, including Alicent Hightower. Meanwhile, at the Red Keep, things are not going well. Since Otto Hightower's departure, the small council lacks the discipline and focus they once had. Cole decides to take a band of soldiers and head to Harrenhal in a bid to control the ever-important Riverlands. Mysaria bargains with Rhaenyra in exchange for saving her life. She wants a place in Rhaenyra's court. Rhaenyra agrees, hoping that her intimate knowledge of King's Landing will be useful. But Rhaenyra isn't done making changes. She decides it is best to send the children away and Rhaena with them to help keep them as far away from the bloodshed as possible. After being absent for most of the last episode, we finally get some Shadow Daddy Daemon time. In an epic sequence, he flies and lands at Harrenhal and makes his way through the castle. What starts out as epic quickly turns comical when Daemon finds zero resistance and instead finds Sir Simon Strong at dinner, who welcomes Daemon with open arms. Cole prepares to leave King's Landing, but gets a last-minute unwanted addition to his party, Alicent's brother, Sir Gawain. Rhaenyra's small council continues to urge her to take action and unleash the dragons, and she does her best to hold the line, but is beginning to feel a mounting pressure that she may not be able to withstand any longer. In a desperate attempt to prove himself, Aegon decides to don the Conqueror's armor and ride to meet Cole on the way to Harrenhal. But a clever Larys is able to spin his web of lies and convince Aegon he would be a better king if he stayed back. Aegon then takes it upon himself to name Larys the Master of Whispers. We are then introduced to Ulf, the supposed half-brother of Viserys and Daemon Targaryen, also known as a dragon seed. Will this become relevant and significant as the show progresses? We can only assume so, but time will tell. Nudity alert! I cannot be the only person whose jaw hit the floor when we got a full frontal view of a naked Aemond as he is interrupted by Aegon from his snuggle session with Madame Sylvie. I really don't have anything else to say about that.
That was jump scare. Oh, HBO, please.
And it was nothing against the
warning.
Yes, like it's nothing against the actor. I just wasn't expecting that. So I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Back on the road to the Riverlands, Gawain and his men decide to make for an inn instead of sleeping on the cold, hard ground. Cole attempts to reprimand them, and in the midst of arguing, Cole spots Bela on Moondancer. In an epic chase scene, they head for the trees and make it just in the nick of time. At the same time, Daemon begins having troubling hallucinations at Harrenhal, and it seems like he'll have to face his demons in more way than one. And finally, Rhaenyra and Mysaria hatch an absolutely ridiculous scheme to get Alicent alone and make a last-ditch effort to prevent a war with dragons. Rhaenyra disguises herself as a nun and makes her way to the Sept. There, she is able to have a brief but haunting conversation with Alicent, where they both realize two things. Alicent misunderstood the meaning of Viserys' final words, and it is too late to prevent a war with dragons.
Oh,
I know.
wow. All right. That was a crazy, or it wasn't crazy, that was the wrong word, but that ending conversation between them was
Unexpected. It was unexpected,
It really
I'll say.
was.
Yeah, kind of came out of left field.
Yes. And a little bittersweet almost too.
Oh, yeah. I mean, all their scenes are, right? Because you just keep thinking about how close they were when they were children or, young women, I guess. Yeah.
And it seems like they continuously try to rekindle that version of themselves. But again, it's been years with things happening in between that really just split their friendship.
Yeah, I think that's a very common thing in real life as well. Like, the more you age, your life circumstances just change and you just can't get back to the people you were when you were at your best together, right? And I think they just can't find their way back.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for that update. There are many key points to discuss. So to the small council we go.
All right. Of course, we're going to talk about the episode title. So ever since the first episode where I was shocked and surprised by blood and cheese, I now always check the episode title before we begin watching so that I am not caught off guard. Before we start talking about the episode title, I did want to notate one thing about the progression of the intro music and the really cool thread sequence. I noticed that this time that it has actually changed to progress with the story. So very distinctly, you see Jaehaerys, I mean, of course, in thread, but you see Jaehaerys' little body, the way it was presented in the funeral scene. And then very cleverly, they do like a red thread across his neck. And then it goes into the next sequence, which is where you see rat catchers hanging from the castle wall in thread, which I thought was really cool. Because I didn't really notice a change in the episode 2 intro, but there was definitely some changes this episode. So now I'm going to make sure I watch it so I can see as it continues to progress.
Oh, okay. I didn't actually watch the intro this time because for everyone that knows, we turn these episodes around as quickly as we can, but I only had time to watch it once, and I was doing this last night. And taking notes for these takes forever. And so I was like, I just need to start the episode, but yeah, I should have watched this time.
It's okay. I got you, babe. Also, for those of you listening, we do have lives outside of this podcast. It doesn't seem like it. Well, we don't. That's the problem. We try to have lives and do this podcast. So you'll have to forgive us. That's why when I say we make mistakes, like we're human beings, please just don't come for us. Okay. We're doing the best we can. But now we have to talk about the episode title. And ever since the first episode where I was shocked and surprised by blood and cheese, I now always check the episode title before we begin watching so that I am not caught off guard. Of course, this one, as usual, is a little obvious, but not immediately. You don't have a really good idea of where it's going to go until after that opening sequence. The title of this episode is called The Burning Mill. And it is a reference to the aftermath of the battle we see at the beginning of the episode. This historical conflict is referenced throughout the episode. We'll do like a little debrief here because it is going to come up a couple times in the episode. So we focus on two houses that live in the Riverlands. You have the Brackens and the Blackwoods, and they have hated each other for as long as anyone can remember. And the Brackens support Aegon and the Blackwoods support Rhaenyra. So on top of their already pre-existing historical feud, you now have this added element of they support different teams and who should be the rightful ruler. So you can only imagine the tensions have really escalated. They have a huge battle, which we don't get to see, but we see the aftermath. It ends very badly for both sides. And in the background, you see a burning windmill, hence the burning mill. So that is what the title is in reference to. But I also think it speaks to a broader theme, which we'll talk about as we move into the opening sequence. So we open this episode in the Riverlands, and we see the Bracken men, and they're just talking, joking about killing Blackwoods. A group of Blackwood men walk up, and they're arguing about boundary stones. Their lands border each other, and the stones that are keeping Bracken cows off Blackwood lands have been moved. And of course, you can immediately tell they're just looking for a fight, right? They probably moved those stones themselves so they can come back later and start a fist fight. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that's it's not funny, but that's what's kind of ironic about their different teams is that them declaring for different houses or whatever was just an extension of the tensions that they already have between houses. It didn't really matter who they declared for, right? That had nothing to do with why they were fighting with each other. They just wanted to fight. So
exactly. Literally looking for any excuse. So they exchange some words, and Aaron Bracken takes out his sword. And just as you think you're about to see a little skirmish where everyone gets rocked, it does this really incredibly wild transition of the same Bracken individual who has a sword deep in the neck, and they zoom out and you just see this absolutely decimated battlefield. I mean, it is bloody, it is gruesome. There's just hundreds and hundreds of dead bodies, and you're like, whoa, that really escalated quickly. I'm sure the two incidences are not directly related, but it's a really cool transition. So immediately after that, you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be like this, huh? Which is, I think, maybe why the episode fell a little flat for me, because you start out with that and then you go to this kind of wandering narrative of send the children away. I'm going to go see Alicent. I don't know. I shouldn't hate on the episode.
No, it's a fair point. I thought that transition was really interesting too. And I guess I was thinking that there was going to be another battle moving forward. But I guess after watching the whole episode, it seems clear to me that maybe that was meant to be foreshadowing for the war actually beginning now, and then
Mm-hmm.
what it's going to look like by the end of this battle or by the
Yeah.
end of this war, I should say.
Yeah. I think you can definitely draw some parallels between those 2 points. But to me, I felt that this sequence was really just a metaphor for the entire conflict, right? And specifically in the scene with Daemon and Sir Simon Strong, he's talking about the Brackens and the Blackwoods. And Daemon asked why they feud. And Sir Simon says, well, that's lost to time. Sin begets sin begets sin. When
Mm-hmm.
you think about that phrasing and you think about the Brackens and the Blackwoods, at some point it quit mattering what it was really about. And it was just about this insatiable need for a power struggle and for blood and glory and really a fight. And this is echoed a couple times in the episode, but specifically in the conversation that Rhaenyra and Rhaenys have in the very next scene where they're burying the Cargill twins.
Yes, I totally agree with that. I think it's more than clear that both sides have done things that are unforgivable, but they keep latching on to the last thing that somebody did, and they use that to fuel their next move, right? And so it's just a never-ending sequence of revenge and power
Yeah.
plays.
Yeah, that's a great segue into the next scene. So right after this scene, we're back in Dragonstone and we see the Cargill twins in a grave. Jacaerys leaves and Rhaenys and Rhaenyra are just left there alone. They begin talking about how things are progressing. And I think that Rhaenys can sense Rhaenyra starting to feel the pressure of the small council and having to make a decision in particular about using the dragons in the conflict. So I think this is Rhaenys' attempt to one last time implore Rhaenyra not to. They have this brief conversation where she's talking about how the men are just thirsting for blood and glory and war. And there's this really good little sequence of the conversation where Rhaenys is saying, who knows when the conflict began? Was it when you killed Jaehaerys? I mean, not her, but you know what I mean. Or when Aemond killed Luke, or when Luke took Aemon's eye way back when, right? At some point, it quit mattering when it started, and it just matters about the outcome. So I thought that was really telling because I think that she's right. Really, both sides, it's not about why, it's just about how it ends for them.
Yeah, I felt that when Rhaenyra was pushing back, their conversation felt reminiscent of what Otto was trying to do with Aegon, right? Although, of course, Rhaenyra is a much more thoughtful person than Aegon is, but you can see how easy it is for emotional instinct to take over and just start overruling any logical thinking, because you can kind of tell that Rhaenyra in this scene wants to do something and, like you said, feels that pressure. But Rhaenys is the one who's keeping a hold on the situation, reminding her that this is going to spiral if you continue to attack, basically asking her to be patient and think about what she does next. I also thought the burial was kind of interesting because it felt very informal in a way, but it seemed fitting for the type of burial that people probably get during a war, if any, right? Most people don't get buried at all.
I don't think so, no.
So, but
I thought it was nice that despite Aric's betrayal, that Rhaenyra buries them together because she knows what they would want. I think that's even speaks to Rhaenyra's character because Jacaerys makes a comment about how he's a horrible traitor and deserves nothing. And Rhaenyra says, I can't fault him for sticking to his oath, which is really very true. That is one of the main tensions between Eric and Arik, is that they're both following their oaths. They just have different paths on how they think is the best way to follow their oath of duty and honor to the crown. So I did appreciate that she respected probably what they would have wanted given the circumstances, especially. And I think that just speaks to Rhaenyra's character.
I was wondering if Jace is perhaps going to make a rash move at some point, because throughout this episode, he doesn't say much at all, but they cut to clips of him pretty frequently and he looks like he wants to do something.
He does. He looks anxious.
So,
yeah. Well, it's funny you say that too, kind of circling back to Rhaenys. I thought that this conversation with Rhaenyra was very evocative of the very first episode of the first season when they're at the tournament and she's talking to Corlys and she's talking about how all of these knights have never seen battle, and then it turns very bloody very quickly. And she sort of has this generic commentary on society and that they all thirst for blood and glory and power. And here we are about 20 years later, and we're kind of in that same position. And so I think Rhaenys has always had this insight into the societal roles of men and how they're raised. And so what kind of expectation that breeds for their existence. I think honestly, Jacaerys is feeling a little bit of that same tension. He's young, he's untested, he wants to prove himself, he's angry justifiably about the loss of Lucerys and everything that's happened. So honestly, I think you may be right that Jacaerys may go a little rogue and get into some trouble. And hopefully it doesn't end in his death, because that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah. We'll see. But he's been watching Daemon just go take off and do shit, right? So,
Yeah.
And I can't imagine that really has a great influence, because
Daemon is also 40.
This is true. Yeah, he doesn't give a shit. But again, I think that dynamic undermines Rhaenyra's authority. And I could see a situation where Jace, carrying the feelings that he has of wanting revenge and feeling anxious about how things are progressing, maybe taking a page out of Daemon's book and deciding to just go take action for himself. But we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Problem is Daemon has a much bigger and better dragon than Jacaerys, and is also much more proficient in swordplay and has actually fought anyone. Whereas Jacaerys has pretty much only done sword fighting in the yard. So, yeah. And the last thing I want to say about this scene, I think this probably every episode, but I really felt it this episode. Fucking Rhaenys should have been queen. All that time ago when it was Viserys versus Rhaenys, fucking Rhaenys should have been queen. The entire trajectory of history would have been totally different had Rhaenys been queen. And I mean, obviously, I'm talking because she would have had different kids and all that. But it just, it's so glaringly obvious in this episode specifically that Rhaenys would have made a much better ruler than Viserys. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
it's hard to watch.
It's really clear that she plays a pivotal role on Rhaenyra's council.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like, she's a huge asset for them, because she is the person that is pretty level-headed and has better instinct over what can happen on a larger scale, because she's seen it time and time again.
Yeah.
With her age and her experience and everything. So I do think that at a minimum, it's really good that she is there for Rhaenyra to help guide her.
You know what Rhaenys' problem is? She's a woman. That's the problem.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem. That's why she wasn't made.
That's everybody's problem. That's like what happened to Alicent now, too. She's been completely sidestepped and can't do shit for Team Green anymore either, so.
And we'll talk about that. Well, actually, this is a good segue into the next scene where we go to the Green Small Council. And it's chaos in there. There's not the same order we've seen in the past. And Alicent calls that out, that since Otto Hightower's departure, the steadying hand that was guiding the council is no longer there. And there's really a lack of discipline that inhibits their ability to have meaningful discussions and make meaningful decisions. But to the point we were just discussing earlier, I think it's interesting that on the small council, even Alicent's power that she had was really derived through the context of having her father on the small council. Because you can see that as soon as Otto Hightower is gone, whatever weight she carried is greatly diminished. Even though she's still the exact same person, she's still the Queen Dowager, it's like all of a sudden her voice isn't as amplified. And I do think that is because Otto Hightower is gone. So I think having her father there helped solidify her position, but she still needed her father's influence to make her voice be heard. I just think Rhaenys and Alicent and Rhaenyra need to get together. They need to kill all the men and just take over the Seven Kingdoms with their dragons.
Oh my gosh, I know. But I think Alicent's gotten to a place, though, where she's too consumed by this realization to continue trying, as we kind of see in the final scene there. As much as she would have wanted to in the past, it, like she said, is too late. There's events in motion that she couldn't stop, even if she had tried to say anything. Again, because of her diminished role, it bears no influence. But that's especially clear on this council scene too, even with Cole, right? Because Cole, who we're like, how the hell did you end up to the king? You are so
oh my god,
to handle a role like that. And you can, I think you can tell that he's pretty anxious about that because, you know, in the beginning, he's by himself. He's just like staring at the floor. And in a joking way, I was like, he better be thinking about all his shitty decisions that he's made in the past several days. But no, instead, he's just very overwhelmed and anxious about his first day on his new job. But he gets to the council room, and as they start discussing what their next move should be, he's bringing up the Riverlands and everything. He does take that stance of authority. He's the one talking directly to Aegon. You see him and Alicent start bickering with each other. And it's pretty clear that, first off, this dynamic is a new dynamic that you're seeing between them. But it's Cole asserting his authority and trying to establish himself as somebody worthy, quote unquote, of being on the council. Meanwhile, Alicent's like, no, this is fucking dumb. What are you guys doing? Like, it was like so dumb for you to send Sir Eric. Anything else that you're suggesting right now is just not well thought out. It's going to end in people unnecessarily dying. But I think when Cole specifically is looking to Aegon for confirmation of things, and Aegon siding with him really solidifies that idea that Alicent is no longer part of this. And Cole, likely a large part of the fact that he is a man, but also in overstepping Otto and everything, has gained Aegon's favor. And it doesn't really matter, right? Nothing matters as far as your influence over Aegon unless Aegon wants you to be there and cares about your opinion. So
I think it's funny that you mentioned how the hell did Cole get positioned at the hand of the king, because one of my favorite parts of the episode is when he meets Sir Gawain and he's like, the gods have greatly favored your ascension. Like, he is so salty about Cole being promoted. I mean, Sir Gawain's not wrong and you're not wrong. It's totally ridiculous that he has been made hand of the king. And I think that's really echoed in this scene because it's immediately obvious that there is tension on the small council. Right off the bat, I forget which member it is, but he makes
Wild.
Maybe it's okay. And he's like the member of the Kingsguard that was lost needlessly so. Like, he makes a little jab right away at Cole for that stupid decision. And I feel like it's even evident too. They're all arguing about the best route to go. And it's not a productive conversation about strategy. It's just everyone shouting for their voice to be heard because Aegon wants to go take Harrenhal like right now. He's like, let's go. I'm ready to fight. Jasper Wilde is talking about how his brother Darren's dragon is near fighting age, so we can use them. And then Tywin Lannister is talking about how Jason is gathering his men, and so we can argue from there. And then it's the Maester. I forgot his name.
I think it's Maester Orwyle.
Maester Orwyle. Okay, Orwyle's like, no, we should gather all of these men together and march as one. So there's really this tension of what strategy should we use, but it's more just about who's going to be heard, whose strategy is going to be selected. And meanwhile, Alicent's like, hi, I'm still here. I'm important. So, and then you have Aegon, who is having an absolute crisis of confidence and having a somewhat public meltdown about his legitimacy as heir, as king, who is just like, I will ride Sunfire. And everyone's like, bro, that is a fucking, like, no. I don't even have words because it's so stupid. You're the king. You can't do that.
His quote was, I am as fearsome as any of them.
I know. He's so desperate for that validation. Like when he's wearing the Conqueror's armor and you're like, Aegon, what are you doing? I kind of feel bad for Aegon. He's just a baby.
I do.
Just a baby.
Yeah. And to wrap up that council scene, the Brackens and the Blackwoods conflict comes up. And I think all of them between Tyler, Orwyle, and Jasper, they're all like, look, that didn't mean anything because, like we had stated earlier, this was a conflict that has been just in constant battle and tension anyway. So it's nothing new that they ended up fighting with each other. But Aegon interprets that as a win and a victory for them. And then Criston announces, I'm going to go take a small army to the Riverlands because Harrenhal is the key to the Riverlands and the Riverlands are the key to this war. And Alicent argues with him to be like, you don't have enough time to gather enough men. And Cole is like, well, I can get there fast. Speed is my ally. I'll just surprise him, essentially, right? And Criston oversteps Alicent to ask Aegon, who agrees with Cole about the strategy. When Aegon does try to suggest he go with them, Cole says, no, you need to stay back. We'll have Aemond and Bagar stay back to defend the city as well. Aegon, of course, is trying to defend his standing, and he's like, you're going to need a dragon. I can handle it. I'm fearsome.
I have a dragon.
But it's funny because everybody just turns to look at him. No one says anything. Everyone's just like side-eyeing him.
A lot of side-eye.
That's not going to work. And I think it just speaks to the point of how much Aegon wants to prove himself, despite realizing internally that he's not really cut out for this. And I think he feels that insecurity. So that's why he jumps at any opportunity impulsively to try to insert himself in some capacity, even though strategically it's not logical. It doesn't have the foresight to see, a couple steps down the line that's a really just a bad plan all around.
Oh, dude. Poor Aegon.
I know.
Also, this is kind of a weird place to put the note, but that's okay. The last thing I want to say about the Brackens, the Blackwoods. So a fun little tie-in to the first season. Do you remember when we're still in the world of young Rhaenyra and she goes on that little engagement tour and she's sitting in the hall and she's listening to everyone's proposal, and that really young kid comes up and he's like, your nights will be safe and warm or something. Do you remember that kid?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then remember how that guy starts talking shit to him? Then you see that kid kill that older guy and you're like, oh shit.
Yes.
That's a Bracken and a Blackwood.
Oh, that's right.
So I thought that was kind of a nice little tie-in.
Yeah, that's fair because that demonstrates that this, again, has just been going on forever between them.
Yeah, so that pretty much wraps up our council scene. So then there's just a brief sequence where you see Rhaenyra do two things. She has a conversation with Mysaria as Mysaria looks at Sea Smoke. And Mysaria tells her that as a reward for saving her life, she would like a place at Rhaenyra's court. This didn't really come as a surprise. I think this is foreshadowed, and you and I discussed this a couple of times. But ultimately, Mysaria wants to side with Rhaenyra because she feels that Rhaenyra will likely be a better queen in championing. That didn't come out right. In championing, I can't do it. Just forget it. In supporting the plight of the small folk, right? She's much more merciful and understanding. And Rhaenyra agrees. So my understanding, I did do a little Googling on this, is that Lady Mysaria basically serves as her mistress of whisperers, but Rhaenyra never actually names her that. She's never officially titled. So maybe they will do it in the show, but I don't think they do it in the books. But regardless, that's her position.
I felt that conversation was interesting because it felt like Rhaenyra is surprised by Mysaria, because Mysaria, I think, seems to be more observant and insightful than she thought, right? I think Rhaenyra perhaps believed that Mysaria was just kind of a lowly criminal with no morals who's just out here making moves purely for money's sake, right? But I think when Mysaria had said, you showed me grace when you could have withheld it, I am not often surprised. It seems like Rhaenyra is going to use Mysaria and have her help in that way as a mistress of whispers, quote unquote. But it also feels like she still doesn't fully trust her and kind of keeps her at a distance still.
That makes sense. I think ultimately Mysaria is very observant, and that is her greatest asset, and specifically her greatest asset to Rhaenyra. So then promptly after that scene, we see a very quick sequence where Rhaenyra tells Rhaena that she is worried about the safety of the children, which makes sense given the fact that Eric was able to infiltrate the castle and almost kill Rhaenyra. So she's going to send Joffrey to ward with Lady Jane Eyre in the Vale. Then she wants Rhaena to write to Prince Reggio, and if he agrees, take Aegon and Viserys to Pentos. Rhaena ain't happy. She's angry because she feels she's not useful, which, not to be mean, she's not. She doesn't have a dragon. She can't do anything. And the best thing she can do for Team Black right now is take care of the future heirs. Because there's a good chance that Jacaerys could die, Joffrey could die, and that leaves Aegon and Viserys next in line. So she's literally protecting the future heirs. I understand Rhaena's frustration. I get it. But baby ain't got a dragon. Sorry. Bond a dragon, and then we can talk.
Yeah, I do wonder again if this means that she will get a dragon. I don't know, maybe once she's over there.
I think so.
Or maybe one of the dragon eggs. Do you think she might get one of the eggs that they brought with them?
I was wondering that. I don't know this for sure, so I'm just speaking based off what I think I know. So if I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me. I don't think the eggs hatch for older people. I think they hatch with a child, basically. Like if an egg doesn't hatch for you by the age of, I'm just going to say like 4, it probably isn't going to hatch for you. But I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities. It seems more likely to me that if Rhaena is going to get a dragon, she's going to get one that's already up for grabs. Because I was thinking about this actually. There's obviously some unbonded like sea smoke or vermithor. But it's also possible, for example, if Baela were to die, Rhaena could try to bond Moondancer. Like,
that's
people can die and their dragons would be up for grabs. So maybe she'll bond a dragon after a character dies and their dragon becomes available. I don't know. But I do feel she's going to get a dragon. It's just, I feel like we're not going to see Rhaena again really this season. We'll see her in season 3.
Yeah, I guess so.
So next we go to Daemon, who, such a great sequence. Oh, Shadow Daddy Daemon, he's on his dragon. It's like all my favorite things combined into one epic sequence. I was so happy. But he arrives at Harrenhal. It's very rainy and misty, and I like when he lands on top of the castle. Again, his dragon is so weird, but it's so cool. Just the way his little snake-like head whips around. And honestly, I found this scene was absolutely delightful. I think it was my favorite scene in the entire episode from start to finish. Daemon lands at Harrenhal, and you can tell Daemon is just like fucking pumped. He's like, yes, I'm going to fight some bitches. I'm going to take over this fucking castle. Like, everyone needs to look out. And he's like walking around. It's so dark and creepy and rainy. And you have to remember that it is canon that Harrenhal is haunted. Everyone knows this. So even though Daemon doesn't seem like the superstitious type, you have to imagine he's just a little bit on edge. So he's like whipping around corners, holding his sword, like he's about to go for it. Yeah. And you can tell he's just like, where's everybody?
Yeah, where's everybody here? And I was too. I mean, before the scene played out, I was expecting some kind of jump scare attack on him. I was like, he's gonna get they're all hiding, they're gonna ambush him. I don't know, but then it just totally devolves into the most like
hilarious scene.
Yeah, everyone just bows down to him. Nobody's there to defend the castle, and Sir Simon is like, yeah, I mean, it's a shitty castle. There's nothing going on. Like,
he really is. So Daemon makes his way into a room where Sir Simon Strong and what remaining family he has there are eating dinner. I just freaking love when Daemon walks in and he's like, I'm claiming Harrenhal.
Yeah.
And Sir Simon says, apparently so. And then he's just very casual. He just gets up and he kneels and he's like, I swear fealty to Rhaenyra. And you can tell Daemon's like, okay, are we going to fight now? And Sir Simon's like, here's what we're having for dinner. Please have a seat. It's just so funny.
I almost do wonder. It felt really like he would have given in to anyone, honestly, because it felt like he could tell that something was gonna happen. Like he was waiting for somebody to come to Harrenhal at some point, and he's like, "This is inevitable. I don't have anything to do at this point, so sure." It's like that. The let's fucking go.
Let's go.
Let's go. Sure.
That's so true. Yeah. I gotta say, I don't know if Sir Simon would have bowed to the Greens because as the conversation unfolds, Daemon makes a comment about his lord, Larys Strong, because technically Larys is the lord of Harrenhal, right? Sir Simon says that he is a scourge upon this castle and this family and that he is no family of mine. And he basically comes out and states that he finds the deaths of Lionel and Harwin extremely suspicious, that they died by fire when they have a hard time even lighting the hearths in summertime when it would be the driest. So that implies to me, well, I mean, it's pretty explicitly stated that.
Yes.
And so I'm not so sure that Simon would have bowed down to the Greens. On the one hand, it kind of seems like he's just non-confrontational and he doesn't want to be bothered. But on the other hand, I do think he harbors a lot of hatred towards Larys, so would make him less likely to bow down. But the conversation continues to unfold, and Daemon basically tells Sir Simon that he wants Harrenhal because it's the key to the Riverlands, and he wants to garrison the 40,000 men that are up for grabs in the Riverlands at Harrenhal because it's the largest castle. So he wants to talk to Grover Tully, who is Lord of the Riverlands. Sir Simon informs him that Tully is basically on his deathbed. He cannot even speak. He's basically on hospice. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know why this thought keeps popping up in the back of my mind. I kind of feel like Daemon is going to go see Lord Tully and he's going to murder him in his deathbed so that the new Lord will take over and declare for Rhaenyra. That seems like a very Daemon thing to do. Again, no spoilers or anything. I have no evidence to support that. It's just this inkling that Daemon would go see him and realize that he's on death's door and be like, pillow to the face and, you're the new Lord of the Riverlands and you will support Queen Rhaenyra. Meet my dragon. You know?
Actually, yeah, that's a good point because the implication from Sir Simon is that Lord Tully ain't doing shit and nobody's listening to him anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Either, which is, I think, the real key in that snippet of information is he doesn't have the authority. Everybody's just making their own decisions without him. So therefore, it would likely be easy to overtake if they wanted to.
Yeah. And then really to wrap up that conversation, the very end, also one of my favorite parts, Lord Simon asks him, what's the plan? And Daemon's like, well, we're going to take over the Riverlands and then we're going to take the throne. And Sir Simon says, the throne. And Daemon says, it's a big chair made of swords. Oh my God. I love Daemon.
I felt like it was funny because he's so disrespectful of the throne. He's like, whatever, it's a fucking chair. But simultaneously, you also know that he was still a little pissed about not getting it, you know? So
yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's just the irony of that statement, I guess, is not lost. But
yeah.
I thought it was funny when, sorry, this is not an important part of the conversation, but when they first sit down to eat, and Sir Simon asks him, aren't you going to eat or anything? And Daemon's like, I've survived many a battle. I do not mean to be felled by poison peas.
Yes. And then he's like, my cook is not that good, but poison seems a little strong. Yeah. Sir Simon is my new favorite character, honestly. He's just
people
great.
Online were comparing him to Sam from
yeah.
Like it just kind of like his general demeanor and how he is just like kind of like doesn't really stand up or confront and very non-confrontational.
Yes.
Right? So
you know what I like about Sir Simon Strong? He likes to be comfortable. Okay. He wants to be warm. He wants to sit down. He wants to eat. He doesn't want to be bothered. And I like that about him because that's how I feel. Okay. That's how I feel.
Comfy, eating, and unbothered.
Exactly. We're in our Sir Simon Strong era, okay?
Yes, yeah. Summer of Simon Strong energy.
Yes. Oh my God. fuck hot girl summer. We're going to do Simon Strong summer. Okay.
It's like rat girl summer or something like that, apparently. Brat girl, I think, or whatever. I don't even know.
I'm old. I don't know what that means. I can't keep up with that.
I don't really know what it means either. It's just something I've heard. So,
oh my gosh.
Fine for a Simon Strong summer. I like that. Sounds
yeah, let's do it. Yeah, agreed. So I almost forgot. The last important part of that conversation before we move on is when Simon and Daemon are talking, he says, my prince, and Daemon corrects him and says, your grace. Then he's like, oh, I had assumed, blah, blah, blah. And again, I could be wrong, so please correct me. My understanding is that, flash forward, presume that Rhaenyra has taken her rightful place on the Iron Throne. She's ruling over Westeros. It is her decision whether to make Daemon king or not. Hypothetically, she could remain queen and he could remain prince consort. It's up to her. So this is Daemon basically flat out lying to Simon Strong, indicating that it is Rhaenyra's wish to make him king by her side instead of just prince consort. I don't know if that's going to come up again later between Daemon and Rhaenyra, but I did think that was interesting that Daemon took that opportunity to give himself a little more prestigious title.
It was 100% like a power grab for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it's going to mean for him and Rhaenyra later on. But for now, he's like, Rhaenyra's not here. I'm here. Like, I have the authority.
Fucking Daemon. Oh, God.
For real.
But great scene. Probably the highlight of the show for me, honestly. Next, we are back in King's Landing and Cole is getting ready to leave. We see Alicent talking to a person we have not seen before, and it is her brother, Sir Gawain. We referenced this earlier, so we won't go in super detail, but Sir Gawain is not impressed by Cole. He is vaguely insulting to him, and I can't say I blame him. He's a good judge of character because nobody likes Cole except for Alicent. And actually, you know what? As I say it, I'm not even sure she likes him. I don't think she likes. I think she, uses him, but I don't think she likes him.
I wasn't sure what was going on with that either. I was wondering if maybe Gawain being there was meant to be a spy on Cole. Like he was going to be there to give info to Alicent so she could keep tabs on what's actually going on out there because she didn't trust that she was going to get information from Criston Cole or that she was going to be privy to it. So I almost wonder if her brother being there was not just to fight, but also to be eyes and ears, so to speak.
See, it seemed more likely to me that he would be spying for Otto.
Oh, that's true too. Yeah.
So Otto knows what's going on in the castles. I don't know, but we'll talk about Sir Gawain more in a little bit. Also, as they're leaving the city, you see one quick shot of a rat catcher that is still decomposing on the castle wall.
That was cheese, I think.
Was it? See, I couldn't tell.
I felt like 99% sure that was cheese. Still,
honestly, they looked so decomposed. Is hard to tell, but ew. Thanks a lot, House of the Dragon.
Also, I would like to mention Criston Cole's haircut.
It looks so bad. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Let me just back up. I hate Cole. Okay,
with hair in this show. Like,
why
they give somebody short hair? I'm like, nah.
It's a no for me. Because I think we all agree that we hate Cole, but we can also all agree that Fabian Frankel is hot as hell. He is a good looking guy.
100%.
So I hate him, and that makes him unattractive to me. But from a physical perspective, he is nice to look at.
Yes.
And then he came out with that page boy haircut. And I was like, did you borrow Jacaerys's wig from the first season? Like, ew, what are you doing? Oh, why?
I don't know.
Why do they take everything good from us?
I know. It looks
so dumb. It does.
Befitting for Criston Cole.
Yeah, like his ugly personality. yeah, exactly. The most important note of the episode.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So after this, we jump back to Dragonstone, and Rhaenyra is having a conversation with the small council. It's kind of the same old. I don't necessarily know we need to rehash this. They want her to act. They want her to use the dragons. Rhaenyra says, no, I'll take it under advisement. It's like beating a dead horse at this point, right?
Yeah.
As we talked about earlier, Rhaenyra is starting to recognize that she's running out of options. She's got to make a decision. And I think at this point, she's starting to accept it's inevitable, but for her own conscience needs to know that she did everything she could to avoid it.
Yes.
So
that's pretty much my takeaway too.
Yeah. And then at the end of that conversation, after she leaves, Rhaenys stops and she's like, I would like to remind everyone at this council that Rhaenyra wears, the golden crown of Jaehaerys Targaryen, the conciliator. And she goes on to say, like, he had the most long-lasting reign and blah, 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 blah. And I think that was Rhaenys trying to remind the men at the table that Rhaenyra is the queen. Yes. Because even one of the council members makes a recommendation that she basically go into hiding.
Her. Yeah.
Yes, while they run the war in her absence. And I love when she's like, that would be treason. And I'm like, yeah, tell them.
These bitches trying to get rid of her so they can do what they want. And I'm like, get the fuck out of here. Y'all are not the authority. So.
Which is so ridiculous because one, Rhaenyra's not going to allow that. But two, they can't control the dragons. Okay, the riders control the dragons. Rhaenys isn't going to allow that. And you really think Daemon's going to allow that too? A bunch of nobodies on the council to run the entire war effort?
Right.
It was just dumb. I think the big takeaway from that scene is that Rhaenyra decides this is what precipitates her to take the action that she does at the end of the episode to go and have a discussion with Alicent before she unleashes the dragons.
Yeah. So it seems pretty clear that in the last episode, we see her own council start to question her. And then this scene shows them actively undermining her in a way and making crazy suggestions like right in front of her face. So it's clear that Rhaenyra has to do something, not just because of the impending war, but also because she needs to get her council in line, right? They're starting to falter. But she realizes that it can't be her using a dragon because that would just end tragically. But she has to be very careful about what she does too. And you also still have the undercurrent of it's going to be tragic no matter what. Like she's going to do everything that she can to try to stop it. But even then, there's no guarantees that there's going to be any kind of peaceful reconciliation.
There's not going to be. I can tell you with 100% certainty. So we then go to Corlys. That's a cute couple name, Corlys.
Corlys.
I like that. We go to Corlys, and Rhaenys is really just debriefing Corlys about the small council scene and how it went. It's not going well. They have yet another conversation about who should be the heir to Driftmark, Joffrey or Rhaena. Neither one of them know anything about ships, and they're both about to be hundreds of miles away, if not thousands. I'm not sure why they keep rehashing this conversation. It feels that, well, as I say, it feels like it's not super important at this time, but maybe it is because to Rhaenys' point, war is coming and Corlys could easily die in the war. But I told my husband this when I was watching. I think it would be silly of them to make Rhaena the heir because Joffrey or Rhaena could die, right? If you make Rhaena heir and she dies and Joffrey still lives, what do you do? So you may as well just leave it as Joffrey being the heir to Driftmark. And then if he dies, then make Rhaena the heir.
I felt like maybe it was more because Rhaena's a lot older. So with war coming, it's more likely that somebody's going to die pretty suddenly. True. Joffrey is still, I think, they said he's like 6 years old. So he's not going to be ready to do anything in as far as ruling goes for several years. And given the unpredictable nature of war and timing of deaths and stuff, it may make more sense to have Rhaena who can immediately step in and start making decisions.
That's true.
But also, I think Rhaenys would like to keep Rhaena close by because again, if Rhaena gets sent off, it's like Laena all over again, where, Laena was far away and she couldn't be protected by Rhaenys, right? Rhaenys cannot oversee and make sure that she's safe in the same way she could if Rhaena was in Driftmark.
Yeah,
perhaps.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that because I think one thing we know about Rhaenys' character is she loves her family and really, I think, is still probably not recovered from Laenor and Laena's death. And so her grandchildren are really all that she has left of them. And I'm not talking about Jacaerys and Joffrey. I'm talking about Rhaena and Bela.
Yes.
Not to be anything, but I'm sure she does love and care for
Yeah.
Joffrey and Jacaerys, but not in the same way she does for Rhaena and Bela, because those are her actual biological grandchildren. Yeah. So we then see Rhaenyra say goodbye to her kids and to Rhaena. It's sad. I'm over it. Bye, Joffrey. Bye, Aegon Visser. I mean, they've had like 6 minutes of screen time each. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay, bye. But it's important to note the internet was going crazy over this. She also gives Bela a clutch of eggs and tells her that she is to protect the future. And I think there's a little double meaning there, right? She's not just talking about Joffrey and Aegon and Viserys, but she's talking about the future of dragons.
And Targaryens in general, and the ability to even ride dragons by anybody.
Yeah. I'm going to say this, and I could be wrong. So just remember, we have not read the books. We only watched the show. There's some controversy because I think one of the showrunners confirmed that these eggs are the same eggs that Daenerys gets in Game of Thrones.
Yes. Yeah, I was about to bring that up.
That, to my knowledge, that is not canon with the books. And that is a big departure of how the eggs are retrieved in the books. So I didn't do too much research into it because I'm always afraid to do too much Googling about the books because I don't want to get spoilers for other characters and events that occur in the show. So I did a little bit, but then I had to slow my roll. But that is interesting. I mean, who knows if we'll ever see those eggs again. Rhaena's storyline really seems unresolved to me. She could go off and basically you don't see her till the very, very end of the show. Or she could come back with a dragon. I don't know. You could take her storyline in a lot of directions.
Yeah. I did think that was such a sad line, though. It really took me out because I was like, they're all going to die. They're just going to have these eggs.
Yeah, probably. Everyone's going to die. Just saying a spoiler alert. Pretty much everyone's going to die.
It's so sad.
It is almost the end of the Targaryen line. So make of that what you will, is my impression. But we then get a very brief scene with Helaena and Alicent in the Red Keep. Helaena is doing a weird grief processing thing where she's like, I'm sad about Jaehaerys, but I know I shouldn't. I think it maybe shows a little bit of her compassion because she seemed to realize that she's in a place of privilege in that although she did have a child die, babies die all the time, and likely even more so for the small folk who don't have the same kind of care and attention. Alicent is a little taken aback by this, and I think she's trying to comfort Helaena and tell her, like, no, you have a right to grief, just like everybody else. And then Helaena pops off with, I forgive you. And we're all like, what?
I was wondering what you thought that meant, because I think it could have been for like a few different reasons, but I was curious as to what you thought she was forgiving her for.
Yeah, I thought about it, and I feel like obviously the first thing you think of is the fact that she walked in on Cole and Alicent, getting it on while her child was being murdered. But I wonder if it had a little bit of double meaning. It was more Helaena absolving Alicent of her shortcomings as a mother. Like, I forgive you for not being the mother I needed. But
right.
We really haven't gotten a lot of screen time with Helaena. We're getting more in this season, which is great. But it's really hard to get a good read on her character and like her motivations and her thought process because we really just don't see enough of her. So I think you could interpret that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I don't have a specific idea either, but I felt like it was probably a few different things.
Yeah.
But in general, I think in Helaena being on that funeral wagon and really seeing the small folk did shift her perspective a lot because I feel like she's been fairly insulated from what's going on and has very little exposure to the small folk and the people. And it shifted her from feeling really scared, I think overwhelmed by the people and how they would perceive her, to her now having a better understanding of what their lives are like and what's going on for them. And I think that plays a role in why she feels she shouldn't really grieve, I guess. And as you pointed out, is in a place of privilege relative to others. Although for Helena, I was like, no, Helena, it's okay. Like,
I know.
protect her at all costs.
I know. She's so sweet. I love her so
I know.
much. Well, Helena and Alicent are having a little heart to heart. Aegon is in the castle and he is trying on Aegon the Conqueror's armor, as is befitting his namesake, which, can I just say at this point, everybody needs to stop naming their kids Aegon. It's so
I know.
confusing. And I guess we'll talk about that a little bit more in Rhaenyra and Alicent's scene when they have the big revelation. But it is Aegon's intent to don this armor and hop on Sunfire and go meet Cole. I have to say, I really, from a tactical standpoint, I hate his new Kingsguard. They're lazy, bumbling idiots.
He just promoted his friends. Those were all of his friends
I
from
know.
before.
Oh,
and
I know.
I'm just like, they have no idea what's going on. They're, oh my God. I honestly had a thought where I was like, I'm surprised that nothing has happened to Aegon yet because, well, I guess granted it's been like a day since they were appointed or whatever, but still, I was like, it would be so easy for somebody to just get up in there and get a hold of Aegon because he promoted his own fucking friends who have no idea of what it means to be a Kingsguard to protect somebody. And I'm sure they would cower. As soon as anybody threatened any of them, they would 100% just fall to the floor, bend the knee.
Oh my God. To be honest, they give me freshman frat bro vibes. Aegon is the leader of the frat and all the Kingsguard are his bros. And they're just like, we're just here for a good time. And they somehow all get promoted in the ranks of the fraternity. But they're actually idiots who can't do anything. And they're just there to get drunk and engage in general debauchery. And I think this is evident because at the end of that scene, they invite him out to go and they're going to take one of the squires to get laid. And they invite him and he's like, yeah, but you have a vow of chastity. And they're like, oh, yeah. That's so funny. Like... And Aegon's like, what? I think maybe he's starting to have the realization that his choices have power and affect things. Yeah. I think he, at the time, was like, yes, I'll make my friends the Kingsguard. We'll get to hang out. But then maybe this was not the best decision. Like, they may not actually be the best candidates to literally guard your life, which is especially interesting given that Jaehaerys was just murdered. So it's a weird choice. But I think it just shows his immaturity as a ruler.
Yeah, and before that conversation with his new Kingsguard, obviously Larys had come in. And he gives him that whole little, which it was pretty evident that this was Larys just spinning things that he had heard in his favor because he says...
He didn't hear shit. He made that up.
Oh, yeah, 100%. But he states that there's a rumor that Aegon was conned into joining Criston so that Alicent can actually rule in his absence with Aemond at her side. And Aegon is like, who spreads these lies? And Larys is like, it matters little. Tails take on a life of their own, like weeds, unless they are tended. And Aegon is like, well, tend to them then. As Larys is trying to leave, Aegon essentially thanks him. And then he's like, I'm going to make you my master of whisperers now. Like you're on the payroll now. Okay, officially.
Which, I mean, honestly makes sense. It's a good position for Larys. So
yeah, it's a good position for Larys. And I will say it's definitely better than who Aegon currently has around them, because I do think Larys is obviously much more observant and calculated about what's going on. And he correctly asserts that with Aegon gone, Alicent has the opportunity to regain control over the council. But also Aegon could very well just fucking die, right? And that would be great. Aegon in the Greens. Larys perceives all of that and rightly influences Aegon to stay back and stay in the castle. But of course, the later implication of that is that Larys, being Larys, always has his own agenda at play. It's pretty obvious that Aegon is not actually that hard to control. Alicent and Otto are like, he's gonna do whatever he wants. He can't be controlled. But then you see Larys just walk in here and, Larys just speaks the language of Aegon. Well, he's just good at manipulating people. So
I was going to say, it's not that Aegon will do whatever he wants. It's that you can't tell Aegon what to do. You can help give him information to help him see what the right choice is. And Larys is perfect for that. It's perfect.
Like the situation where you always have to make the other person feel like they're the ones that made the decision, even though you're
it was their
idea
them
there, but it was their idea. It was their decision, so that they feel like they had the power in this choice. But I think that conversation obviously led to Aegon's very sudden decision change to not go right on his dragon to join Cole in the Riverlands. And this sequence of events, how he was acting in the council, again, just reflects how unsuited he is for the role. You also kind of see that in his face, right? He like stares at his own reflection for a minute. And I think it's evident that he knows deep down that he's not suited for this and he never should have been. It's that underlying insecurity that he's always had. But simultaneously, now that he is king, has inflated sense of authority and justification for being king, right?
Oh, yeah. He's at least fun to watch on screen, though.
I know. this poor man. You do feel bad for him because he really is just...
Yeah. Oh, I do.
He's so impulsive and he makes like really stupid decisions, but you can also pretty much see that at his core, he is still just a kid who...
I know. He's so young,
needs
too.
to feel validated.
I know. But we will see Aegon again shortly. I guess they go to a tavern and then to a brothel. Yes. But at the tavern, we are officially introduced to Ulf, which actually you see him in the last episode. He is the character who walks up when all the rat catchers are hanging and he asks the lady what's going on and she tells him. So you actually see him. Yeah, you don't know who he is until this episode. So this is his official introduction into the world. But he is having drinks and a conversation with some randos at a table. I think he knows them, but they're just randos to us. He reveals that his grandsire is King Jaehaerys and that he is the son of Balon the Brave, bastard brother to Daemon and Viserys, which makes him a dragon seed. That's really all the information you get from that. I think the fact that he has Targaryen blood is going to become important later in the show, but to what end, I'm not sure. I don't know if that means he can bond a dragon. I don't know if that means he's going to get made a position of rank because he has Targaryen blood. And again, there's no DNA test, so you can't prove lineage anyway. So I have a feeling it's going to have something to do with the dragons, but we really don't know. It did make me wonder if Hugh from the last episode is a dragon seed because he has the white blonde hair.
Really?
I mean, I don't know for sure. I'm just speculating. But Hugh,
the blacksmith?
Yeah, he has like really white blonde hair because I wasn't sure why they kept bringing him up in the show. And I wonder if he's also a dragon seed.
I thought the blacksmith had brown hair. Really? Oh, I did not remember that at all. For some reason, I just thought he had brown hair. I don't know why. I think I was just placing the hair colors of everybody else around him onto him. Like I would see... Okay. So interesting, though. That's interesting.
I don't know, but I remember we talked about the same thing with Alan and Adam of Hull. Like they keep introducing all these characters. You're like, why are they important? So I'm wondering if Hugh is going to be important because he's also a dragon seed. It could totally be something else because he is also the person who's making scorpions, the weapons to kill dragons. So maybe that's
true.
Why his storyline's important. So as that scene continues, Aegon and his Kingsguard come in and they're there with the squire to help him with his virginity, which is such a weird thing when you think about it. Like, imagine doing that in
like
modern
hazing
day.
Him.
Yeah, exactly. So I did think it was funny when Aegon comes in, everyone stops and he's like, drinks for all, and everyone's like, Aegon. Which I was just like, okay, Aegon, whatever. That's a good use of your money during times of war. But they quickly go to the brothel and you know, we love a brothel scene. Seems like we live in this brothel every damn episode. But Aegon is clearly drunk and he is looking for Madame Sylvie for the young squire. Pulls back the curtain and we see a naked Aemond cuddling with Madame Sylvie. it's a little bit of an awkward scene. I think it's supposed to play awkward, so there's that element. But Aegon starts teasing Aemond about how Madame Sylvie was his first, and he's never
departed from that. And from her, really.
He's just stayed with her, which, I mean, I think in this universe, men are just supposed to just go out and sleep with whomever they please. And it's embarrassing for a man to not be engaged in that kind of behavior.
Well, I also think that to speak to the brothel situation, they treat the brothels as a place for them to have fun and then go on their merry way, right? It's not supposed to be a place of
emotional fulfillment.
And they just don't respect the people in there, really. Right. From Aegon's perspective. I felt like that whole situation was just really cruel. It was like a return to Aegon as he was in season 1. And in general, it seems to show how little he thinks of Aemond in a way, which part of this was just him being drunk and being more of an asshole than perhaps he might be if he was normally sober. But even then, I think he knows that Aemond's really not going to do anything to him or can't do anything to him. And so he takes advantage of that and embarrasses Aemond. And
I think it's pretty clear that Aemond is embarrassed. He stands up and we get a full frontal view of everything.
Aemond should have given us a warning. That was like such a jump scare. I was like,
I was
like what?
I know. And it's like the equality in me is like, well, we see women's naked bodies on screens all the time. So why should I get weird when I see a man's naked body? But honestly, I was like, whoa. I was like, I guess I'm just not used to it.
Because the context was supposed to be this very intimate situation between Aemond and Sylvie.
Right.
So it feels like you shouldn't have been there. Like you weren't supposed to watch this interaction happen.
We were not.
And then you're seeing the aftermath of the embarrassment, the shame, the unwillingness of Aemond to stand up to Aegon. He kind of just takes it and he walks off. Like he has to save face by also telling them your squire is welcome to her. One whore is as good as another, right? Even though it seems like he really cares for Madame Sylvie, but he can't.
I think he does
show that to Aegon, and so he puts on like a front.
So Aemond departs from that scene, and well, it was a scene that we all watched together.
It was a scene, yes.
It was a
Indeed.
scene. So then we go back to a quick scene of Rhaenyra. She's packing away Aegon and Viserys' toys, and she's feeling sentimental. She reads Alicent's note, and that is foreshadowing for the conversation that is about to happen with Rhaenyra and Mysaria. But first, we get to visit Cole and Gwaine again. And honestly, with Sir Gwaine, why would I want to sleep on a cold, hard ground when I can just hop on the horse and go stay at an inn? I think Sir Gwaine wants to be part of the Sir Simon Strong summer. Okay, he wants to be comfy. Yes. He wants to sit down. He wants to eat unbothered.
He wants the glory of being like, I went to go fight, but he wants to go glamping. Okay,
he's not
sit in the woods.
Sir Gwaine the glamper.
Yes.
That is so funny. But yes, so Cole, of course, being the sanctimonious douchebag that he is like, no, you need to come back. We need to turn back right now. And as they're arguing, he sees a little tiny speck way in the clouds, and it is Baela on Moondancer. So immediately they're like, oh shit, we need to run quickly. Yeah. And so they make their way for the trees. And this is a really great scene. It's just a classic chase scene. You see Baela, which, okay, I know we need to distend reality for the show, but how the fuck did she see them from that high up? Okay, I've been on an airplane. You can't see shit. Okay, you can't see shit. That's bullshit. But fine.
Simultaneously, I was also wondering how Criston saw them way up there.
Thank you. Too. Okay.
Because I was like, how did you... They were really high up there. So for both of them to have seen each other, I don't know. But
if it had been a whole army, that would obviously be a much larger area for you to see and like the movement. Yes. But it was like 6 people on horses. But anyway, regardless, Baela swoops down and they're running. They're almost to the woods and you see Moondancer right on their tail. And I was like, light them up. I
was wondering if she was just trying to scare them or if she would have actually flamed them. I wasn't sure.
Well, she really probably could have, because I don't want to get into like the mathematics of how far can a dragon's fire go, But then remember later when she's talking to Rhaenyra, she says, "You told me not to engage." So I think
Yeah,
she's
yeah,
under orders not to engage in that way. And that's probably why she
yeah,
didn't just roast him, but she should have
yeah.
roasted him.
Sure.
War's already started, so whatever. But anyway, that's really all that happens that scene. Then Baylor reports back to the Black Council, and they're like, okay, now we know this. We really have to take action now. They're marching towards Harrenhal. Then we're back at Harrenhal with Daemon, and this is a great sequence. It was something different I feel like we haven't really seen, especially when Daemon's character, but he starts hallucinating, and that seems reasonable given he's at Harrenhal, and we know Harrenhal is supposed to be a cursed castle. Ever someone's shaking his door and he gets his sword, he, looks out to see anybody, and he's making his way through the castle again, and he hears someone singing, and he goes into the room, and it's young Rhaenyra. She says, "Always coming and going, aren't you? And I have to clean up afterwards." Young Rhaenyra is sewing the head of young Jaehaerys back onto his body. I read a couple of different interpretations of this scene, but I wanted to ask what your thoughts were about this.
I wasn't sure if this was just a dream he was having on his own while he slept, or if this was the influence of the lady. Because remember that same lady that he sees at the end of his scene, who's
Yes.
like, "You will die in this place." She was the same one who had walked in. I don't actually know who she is. I forgot to look her up, but she felt kind of witchy to me. She felt like the witch that was in Game of Thrones
Yes.
in a
She
similar
gives
manner.
a little bit of mystical vibes.
Yes. And so I was wondering if this was just a manifestation of both Damon's own guilt, of his realization of some of the things that he's done in the past and how he's contributed to the disappointment that people feel about him
Mm-hmm.
because of his own rash actions and stuff, or the influence of some kind of magic at play
Mm-hmm.
in a way. I didn't feel like it was purely David just having this dream of his own accord, but I think it
Mm-hmm.
did play off of things that he was already feeling. Mostly because,
Mm-hmm.
again, there's that witch lady there.
Oh, see,
But
I didn't read into that just because I don't know who she is. You see her for
that's
3 seconds in the dining hall, and then you see her in that sequence. I do agree that she gives mystical witchy vibes, but I literally don't even know her name. And I didn't look it up because, again, I don't want spoilers. I do think that she's going to come up again, but I honestly took it as more Daemon is in a haunted place. He is haunted by his past actions and mistakes. And it's the culmination of stress, anxiety, and all of these things coming together that kind of put him in this hallucinatory dream state. So it's very possible he's also under some modern influence of mystique and maybe a little bit of voodoo. But
I was wondering if when she says you will die in this place, that has to be foreshadowing for his dust to come, obviously, right? I don't know when or how long it's gonna take, but I'm like, "Ooh, oh, okay."
Yeah. I don't think this is the case. I am like a teeny bit worried that he's going to die at Harrenhal in the next episode. That seems unlikely to me because he's such a key player, but
Yeah.
next week is the mid-season finale. So
Yes.
we're
Well, I
halfway
thought they were
through
gonna have
the
we
season.
keep being like, "They're gonna have dragons finally. They're gonna have a battle." But I think it feels like that is based off of the trailers, but we'll see.
I know. I'm hoping we just get a really good battle sequence, but everyone lives. That's what I want, which I know is not possible because that would not be a good battle sequence if everyone lives.
Like, it's just like a little skirmish.
Yeah.
Like a true battle, but just a little small army versus small army action.
Yeah, exactly. So I like this scene just because it's Daemon having to face his own demons.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of, well, if it isn't the consequences of my own actions.
How the turntables.
The tables have turned.
Well, It's from The Office. Maya held the turntables.
Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's been a hot minute since Mama watched The Office. Okay, I'm all about House of the Dragon now, Lorraine. This isn't the
I
Office
know.
podcast, okay? I'm thinking about dragons and Daemon 24/7.
I'm just like inserting little pop culture references from like TikTok or shows and
I
stuff.
appreciate that. One of us has to keep up with the times, and it ain't gonna be me. It ain't gonna be me. But after this, we finally begin the last sequence of scenes, and Rhaenyra and Mysaria have a brief conversation where they hatch the plot to sneak Rhaenyra into King's Landing to see Alicent, which, how convenient that nobody would care or notice, but I will distend reality once again so I can enjoy the plot of the show.
I just think that it's funny because Rhaenyra doesn't know what to do. She's the queen now. She's got royal duties and shit to perform. She doesn't know how to scheme. And she's like asking Mysaria, how do I do this? What do I do? And Mysaria's like, yeah, let's dress you up as a nun. We're gonna go to the set.
It's such a stupid plan. It's such a
I was like really becoming a sister. So
literally. So Rhaenyra makes her way into King's Landing and they go to the Sept. That is the one place that Alicent goes without a lot of supervision. She's accompanied by guards, but in the actual Sept where she prays, it's a holy place and all that. And this scene is just, let me just start off by saying, I think this scene is annoying because it's not in the books. Explicitly, nothing like this happens in the book. Okay. I asked my husband and I also Googled it because it didn't feel like a scene that George R. Martin would write. I understand why the showrunners wanted to input it, but something about it didn't sit well with me. Maybe because I think the conversation doesn't resolve anything, and I think it destroys this sort of nice tension that Alicent and Rhaenyra's characters have because of all the miscommunication, misunderstandings between the two of them. And it's like, now they've cleared it to light. I didn't feel like it added anything. But regardless, we're still going to talk about it because it happened and we're talking about the show, not the books.
I was going to say, I was listening to, I think it's literally called House of the Dragon podcast, but it's like the official House of the Dragon coverage podcast. And when they had been talking about this scene, they had mentioned that it seems like they inputted it there because in the books, as you mentioned, the viewpoint of the books is told as if they're like from a third party. We're not really given a lot of first person perspective, really. It seems like it's all just word of mouth by this one character. I forget his name. The implication being that there's likely a lot of things that were never discussed or brought to light. And so this scene was supposed to perhaps give us some of that background info of here's what was going on still behind the scenes before battles actually took place.
Oh, okay.
I guess. And that's what it felt like to me too, honestly. We're seeing them give a last-ditch effort to continue trying to prevent something that is likely unstoppable, but regardless, they don't really want it to happen. So it's giving us the context of understanding as a viewer that it happened, but it kind of became its own just runaway train. But I think in getting this scene, you really hear that from the characters themselves, which I think was important because I think it cleared the air. I've been waiting for some kind of moment of them to address that a lot of these things were just misunderstandings. Aemond didn't mean to kill Luke. Rhaenyra didn't even know about Jaehaerys dying, and yet both of them are being blamed for these things as if they intentionally did them. And so for them to come out and finally be like, wait, I didn't know about that, or I had no part of this, or it did happen, but I feel really guilty. And for them to look each other in the eye and actually see that the other person felt remorse or was telling the truth, I think was really important.
Yeah. That's fair. It makes sense. I get why it's narratively important, but I wasn't a fan. I did think it was funny that Rhaenyra kneels and the first thing she does is take out a knife.
Not a knife.
I'm like, What are you doing? How do you think Alicent is going to respond to that?
Well, even Alicent was like, what were you going to do? Because Rhaenyra was like, your knights would find me, I'd be taken or slain, but not before I kill you. And then she's like, okay. And then what was your plan? And Rhaenyra's like, oh shit. And she's just kind of like, and then she's like, I've begun badly.
Yes, that actually made me laugh. I'm like, girl, you started this so badly. You had one shot at this and you come out literally with a knife, literally facepalm moment for Rhaenyra, okay? Yeah. But the summation of that conversation is they have a little exchange back and forth, and Rhaenyra is really like, how could you usurp my throne? And Alicent says, I didn't, and again, we've talked about this many times. Alicent genuinely believes this is what Viserys wanted. It's not in Alicent's nature to be deceitful. And I think that Rhaenyra knows that. And Alicent even says that. She said, I may have been unkind, but I've never been untrue. I think Rhaenyra sees that in her eyes. And that's why she asks her, well, what did my father say at the end? And then that's when Alicent reveals what he said, that Aegon was the prince at his promise. And you see the light bulb turn on for Rhaenyra. And she's like, my father used those words exactly. She says, yes. Then she tells him it's a story about Aegon the Conqueror. And you see Alicent, she's like, the Conqueror, Aegon the Conqueror? She's like, yeah, not your Aegon. And then I was like, maybe we should all stop fucking naming our kids Aegon, because you've got Aegon the Conqueror. You've got Aegon, Alicent's kid. You've got Aegon, Rhaenyra's kid. Yeah. There's a lot of Aegons running around, okay? So maybe if we had picked a different name like Ulf, there would have been no confusion. Okay?
Ulf.
I'm just saying.
Bob. Okay.
Thank you. Bob. Okay.
Jeff. Okay. Something.
But yeah, the moral of the story is don't name your kid Aegon. Ultimately, at the end of this conversation, Alicent is kind of dismissive of Rhaenyra. And I think Alicent, first of all, is horrified and embarrassed that she had this confusion. And she doesn't want to confront that, because Alicent has done all these, I don't want to say horrible things, but she's done all these things in pursuit of honoring Viserys' last wish, only to realize that was not what he wished for. And it's too late to undo it. Ultimately, what Alicent says is right. It doesn't matter. Alicent doesn't have the power to stop it. Neither does Rhaenyra. These things have been set in motion that can't be undone. And Alicent exits that conversation, and Rhaenyra realizes that was the last effort. And I think even Rhaenyra has to realize in this moment, what did she really expect Alicent to be able to do? Tell Aegon, no, son, you need to get off the throne and do what exactly? They're not going to give up the throne. Why would they? And so I think, as you said, they needed to have that conversation to narrate each other's experiences and how those intersected and why they made the decisions they made. But ultimately, doesn't matter, because can't be undone.
I felt the frustration that Rhaenyra feels, because she's still hoping that something can be done to prevent it. And so for Alicent to just feel like it's too late is very, I think, hard to hear. But I think it was the setting in of reality for Rhaenyra too, to understand that truly there is no stopping this war now, and you need to start actually preparing for it. So
in a big way, or else.
Yes.
It's a tough conversation to swallow, but I think a little bit necessary, so that at least Rhaenyra can feel resolved in her decision to move forward in a more aggressive military way. And we'll see how it plays out. Probably not well, if I had to guess. So, and that's the end of the episode.
Yep. So next we are going to move into our fantasy court of law. Where do we stand in our trial for Team Green versus Team Black?
So as always, we'll start with Team Green. I gotta be honest, very little movement for both sides in this episode. This episode is a little bit more about the personal relationships and decisions they have to make that don't really affect the outcome of the war. It's more of the decision to actually go to war. For Team Green, it is mentioned that Aegon's brother Darren in Old Town does have a dragon, and it is almost a fighting age. I'm 99% sure Darren's going to come up. I don't know if it's in this season or next, but he and his dragon are going to be important. Anytime you can add a dragon to one side, it's going to be beneficial. So I just thought that was a little bit more information we get about Darren, that He and his dragon are both of almost fighting age. The second
Mhm.
is Cole and his men are marching towards Harrenhal. We know that Harrenhal is the key to the Riverlands, and the Riverlands are pretty key to the war effort because there's 40,000 bannermen up for grabs. Obviously, Daemon's already there, so we'll talk about that in a minute, but it is at least some kind of activity that Cole is making a play for Harrenhal. And then last, this is kind of for and against both sides. The Bracken and the Blackwoods Battle of the Burning Mill. Lord Sam Blackwood has been slain. That will weaken the Blackwoods, and the Blackwoods are the house that most support Rhaenyra's claim. However,
Mhm.
as it's stated in the small council scene, both sides take pretty heavy losses. So it's not necessarily a win, but it's not really a loss. But it is
Yeah.
some kind of activity that I guess is good and bad for both sides. Did you have anything for Team Green?
I guess it's not really concrete evidence, but I think the tensions and separation of their own family, I'm curious to see how this is going to pan out because Alicent has no authority anymore to really control what Aegon does. Aegon is not equipped to be leading anything and tends to be very rash. Aegon also just probably really pissed off Aemond when he made fun of him in the brothel in front of everybody. And I don't think Aemond's going to take to that very well. And Aemond has Vhagar, who is the biggest dragon currently. And if he does not remain aligned with Aegon, then that has consequences for their power later on.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel like that is going to cause a rift in Team Green. So
Yeah.
we'll see if that continues to play out or if it just builds tension for later. But for Team Black, Daemon is officially arrived at Harrenhal, presumably to raise an army. I do think it is to his benefit that Sir Simon Strong swears fealty to him and Rhaenyra. And as of right now, Daemon does technically hold Harrenhal. And then same thing, the Bracken and the Blackwoods conflict of the Battle of Burning Mill. Good for them, also bad for them, but it does move the needle in some direction.
Yes.
And
Or
that's
is
really
that
it.
for Team
Yeah.
Black? I think the decision for Rhaenyra to send away her three youngest children and the eggs is important too, because she is making decisions to safeguard them should anything happen to her or Jaehaerys and the rest of them. It's her small insurance policy that her line will not be completely eliminated. I mean, there's no guarantee that they're going to survive either, because who's to
Right.
say that this wouldn't extend out to Pentos or that there wouldn't be some move to go get her other children as well on Team Green's part. But for now, it is strategically a safe choice.
Yeah. When I think about that, it doesn't move the needle in the conflict,
Yeah.
but it's a protective measure for the future and the longevity of Team Black. So, yes,
Yeah.
I think that's important to note as well.
All right. That is where we stand in the fantasy court of law. And of course, last but not least, we have our favorite moments. So, do you want to go first or should I go first?
Yes, I'll go first because I feel I'm about to be interrupted by my children. So I can just put it on mute when it's your turn. So my first favorite part of this episode is when we flying to Harrenhal. I know I said this earlier in the episode. It's misty and rainy and dark and lightning, but it's just a really cool visual scene. It's just a lot of good special effects and everything. And it really sets the tone for the scene and it gives you a creepy, haunted feel. And it fits very, very well. And then that, of course, leads into basically the entire scene with Sir Simon Strong. He is absolutely hilarious. I am totally for Sir Simon Strong summer, sitting down, eating, comfy, unbothered. And just really their entire exchange. There's a lot of good lines they exchange, like about the peas. And then, of course, my ultimate favorite line, it's a big chair made of swords. How else could you describe the Iron Throne,
This is true.
And yeah, those are my favorite moments. What were your favorite moments?
My first one was when Aegon is in the council room and Aegon is talking about how he wants to fly with Sunfire and meet Cole and everything. And his last words to them are, I'm as fearsome as any of them. And everyone's like, yeah, okay, Aegon.
That's a really good one.
Yeah. So then my next favorite one was part of Damon and Sir Simon's conversation. And he sits down, he doesn't eat the dinner, and he says, I've survived many a battle. I do not mean to be felled by poison peas. And he's like so suspicious of everything in the castle.
Wouldn't that be so funny if that's actually how one of the characters went? Is by poison bees. Maybe that's a little
Oh my
foreshadowing.
gosh. Dude, honestly, I'm surprised that nobody has attempted poisoning or anything like that yet. Like, how easy would
Yeah.
it be to just get one of the spies in the Red Keep to poison some wine and then they like bring it into a council meeting or something? Like, it would be so easy, but they never do any of that. So,
And instead, Cole's like, Sir Auric, I want you to pretend to be your twin, sneak into Dragonstone and do the deed. You know, it's like, oh, that was your best option.
definitely not. But that was funny. I also like that Sir Simon refers to Laris as Clubfoot, which is kind of,
Yes,
it's
so
really
mean, but
it's
also
mean
hilarious.
out of context, like in the real world, I'd be like, oh, that's really fucked up. But when he's talking about Laris, I'm like, that's really funny.
Yes, I felt the exact same way. I'm like, that's not PC, but it's appropriate because he's
Yeah,
a bad guy.
yeah, exactly. And then this was more of a serious one, but I did like when Damon asked Sir Simon how the conflict between the Blackwoods and the Bracken started, and Simon just says that is lost in time, sin begets sin. And like we stated in this episode discussion, that's the theme of this entire conflict and many conflicts, both in fictional worlds and real worlds, right? People get mad at each other over something they did, they retaliate, and it just continues in a never ending cycle. Or on the other hand, conflict just starts from misunderstandings and not having the right information or interpreting something that somebody did or said wrong. And then it just spirals out of control, even though the intent wasn't to be mean or ill willed or anything like that. So,
Yes, sin begets sin is really a great line.
I think so too. Wraps up everything pretty well. Oh, I did like Damon's vision scene too. I thought that was
Oh,
just
yeah.
because it was very different than a lot of the scenes that we've gotten in House of the Dragon so far. So I appreciated having a little bit more of, even though maybe it wasn't magic, it felt there was a little bit more magic and it brought
Mystical.
you a
Yeah.
little more into the feeling that this is fantasy, right? Because like House of
Yeah.
the Dragon has very little fantasy. It's really just the
The
dragons are
dragons.
the main thing and maybe a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of witch stuff going on. And more so in Game of Thrones, you see a lot more of the fantasy elements of that. So it was kind of cool to see a little bit more of a introduction of that.
I agree, because really, you're right. It is pretty much only the dragons, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So it is nice to get a little more. I don't know. I'm wiggling my fingers like magic.
Mystical,
I'm like
fantasy,
mystical
magic. Yeah.
Ooh.
Fiction, right? Fantasy fiction. And yeah, that concludes our episode for today. So thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of the Book Dumb Fantasy podcast. If you would like to keep up with us on other platforms, then all of our socials are linked below in the episode description. That is all that we have for you guys today. Stay nerdy, everyone, and we'll catch you all next week for House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 4. Bye.
Bye. Just as they are about to come, or no, I don't want to say come to blows twice. Damn.
Fight.
Just
Fight.
fight. Okay. Let me see. But a clever Laris is able to spin his web of wise. Since Otto Hightower's departure, the steadying hand. Haha, get it? Okay. The steadying hand. Everyone knows Laris played a death in the death of his father and brother.
I was like, this is not Rhaenyra's crime cloak, or it's not her crime cloak session. It's like a sister act. It kind of became its own, what's the term about the trains? The train just like runaway train.